Hello, and welcome to the Vlogging Pod. Tonight, we are joined by Kathi Miracle. Welcome, Kathi. How are you this evening?
I'm good. Thank you for having me on the show.
Oh, it's a pleasure. It really is. So, for most people who don't know, give us a little bit of a background of you and where you're at.
Okay, I'm actually a native of Colorado. I grew up in a suburb of Denver, Colorado. I spent more than 30 years in senior living, and I specialized working with families, individuals with a form of dementia and their families. And I have slowly, about 10 years ago, I guess 11 years ago, I started learning about how to protect and maintain cognitive health so that individuals could avoid a dementia diagnosis, delay it, or even in some cases, reverse cognitive decline. So that has become my new passion over the last couple of years to help individuals protect and maintain cognitive health.
Nice, nice. Now, just for full disclosure, my mother-in-law had dementia before her passing this last year.
Ugh,
So, yeah, yeah. It's traumatic, isn't it?
it is. I tell everybody that if you've met one person with dementia, you've met one person with dementia. No two people could be born on the same day, grow up in the same environment, same kind of education, have the same everything throughout life, get diagnosed on the same day, and they will still take two completely different paths on their dementia journey. I have also described this journey to family members as it's like walking into an unknown amusement park. It is some days the ride's fun, some days the ride is scary. Some days you get off the ride and get sick, and other days you don't want to go on the ride at all. And
Uh,
so I actually have a book coming out that the entire book is themed around an amusement park to help families better navigate the twists, the turns, the ups, the downs.
wow, that's nice. I like that idea. That's really great.
Thank you.
So, you're welcome. So, what first drew you into working in senior living, and more importantly, what kept you there for more than 30 years?
That's a question got asked that a lot early in my career, and I really couldn't pinpoint everything. So, because I get asked that a lot, I started really looking at it. I never knew my paternal grandmother, and I never knew my maternal grandfather as they died before I was ever born. And then my maternal grandmother passed away 10 days before my 13th birthday. And the following year, my paternal grandfather passed away 5 days before Christmas. So, sort of a tough time in a kid's life to lose two grandparents back to back at very important holidays and celebrations. And my parents told me that I would naturally gravitate to older adults at church, in our neighborhood, in a grocery store, in restaurants. And I just loved sitting and listening to their conversations. And I have a double bachelor's in speech path and audiology, and I really wanted to work with older adults that had had strokes or some kind of impairment from a speech standpoint. And at the time I got that degree, I was told I would probably spend the first 7 years in elementary schools because jobs with older adults just weren't that frequent. They were
Mm,
hard to get. However, the university that I attended in Northern Colorado at that time had one of the top 10 gerontology programs in the nation. So I was really super lucky to go through that program. And I have my master's degree in gerontology with an emphasis in dementia and elder abuse. And so I started my senior living career at 22 years old as a certified nursing assistant in a nursing home on an Alzheimer's unit. And I was hit and kicked and punched and scratched, thrown into a wall, ribs broken, you name it. I did it wrong because I got trained how to bathe and dress and transfer and feed. Actually
mhm,
trained to change linens when someone is laying in bed and
mm.
evacuate. But I never got taught how to interact with a person with dementia. So I did it all wrong and I got hurt. And as I continued my career in senior living, and I've worked just about every job in senior living, haven't worked them all, but just about every one of them. And what kept me in it is making sure I could ensure quality of life for that person. There was a reason they were in my senior community and they weren't being cared for at home anymore, or they couldn't be. And there were so many various reasons why that happened. But the residents, I loved listening to their stories. I think that's what kept me so much in senior living is just the amazing stories I would listen to when we look at our older population, the amount of changes they saw in their lifetime. I don't know that anyone else will ever see. They went from no television in a home to now we have flat screens in a home.
Mm,
They went no net, no, not even a computer. I mean, if you look at all the technology changes and all the other changes that happened from, the 1930s, 1920s, 1930s to today, that's amazing that they did, and
yes.
in my career, I've had the pleasure and honor of taking care of so many, but, like, I had the honor of taking care of a NASA astronaut and what the amazing stories he had, or a woman who she was the first woman in her family to go to college and get a PhD. Not just a college degree, but she had a master's degree and a PhD. A woman
Right.
who had 14 children at home. I don't know. God bless that woman. I I mean, even one of my favorite residents, he helped paint the bottom of the Enola Gay, which was the airplane that
Uh-huh.
hit the bomb on Hiroshima. So the amazing people I got to interact with and just hear their stories and listen, and it was just wonderful to interact with so many families and that they trusted when I got to be an executive director, they trusted me and my team to take care of their loved one. And the families too were just as amazing in listening to their stories of how much they cared about their parents. And it was a very rewarding career.
It sounds. When I have to in another full disclosure, if you've seen some of my podcasts and background, about 2.5, probably about 3, almost 4 years now, my father well, he's passed away now, but prior to that, about 4 years, 5 years, we had to do he didn't have dementia per se, but because of things he was going through, his cognitive wasn't there all the time,
Right.
and I found at that time and now my mother lives on the property, she has her own apartment across from my she shed,
Hmm.
and my listeners are probably like, "Yeah, yeah, we've heard this before." But 'cause I talk about it all the time. It's another reason why I wanted this podcast to focus more on our aging,
Uh-huh.
because I found going through it, there's so much information that you don't know,
Correct.
and you're blindsided a lot of the times when you're just thrown into it, and because we're so concerned about our probably our parents or our grandparents at that particular point, or even your spouses, you're not you know what I'm saying? You're not taking in the full things of every little attribute that's happening or information at your fingertips. So I think that was the biggest reason that I really was interested in doing more about our aging.
Hmm.
Um, and in that respect, when you speak with families, what is the biggest thing of confusion that you deal with as far as the family and what their seniors are going through, especially even where it comes to dementia?
It I don't know that there's any one thing because every family is slightly different, and it really kinda depends. Am I talking to a family member where there's no children? Maybe it's just only the spouse and they don't have children to help them through stuff, and that is a completely different conversation than the family the largest family I ever took care of was when I was a CNA, was a lady who had 14 children, but as an executive director, the largest family I interacted with was 1 son and 10 daughters. And
Wow.
that was very interesting. We finally had to tell the son, "We need one point of contact. Every time your sisters come in the building, they're asked they have to do something different based on what they want." So, what the repeating pattern that I find is that oftentimes families will hear the diagnosis that your loved one has Alzheimer's or your loved one has a form of dementia, and then they kinda get handed a brochure and said, "Oh, we'll see you in 6 months." And they kinda walk out feeling like, "What just happened? I just got gut punched. I don't even know what happens in the next 6 months." And, are they gonna decline? Are they gonna plateau? I mean, there's so many questions that families start asking. And I feel like, not that there's not good information out there. So I don't ever wanna bash a company. So I've worked with the Alzheimer's Foundation. I've worked with the Alzheimer's Association. I interact with a lot of different dementia, groups on Facebook and
Uh-huh.
whatnot, and they're great. There's a lot of information that's out there. What happens is it's so general, families don't really understand how to take it and apply it to their personal situation, and so that's where sometimes I think the disconnect can happen. At times I have seen incomplete information that's out there, like the families are given maybe part of the story, and so and I even will jokingly, I tell the doctor, like, I read an article that tells me that I should do A, B, and C, and then I read another article from just as well of an, known professional that says don't do A, B, and C. Like, which one's right? And it's like,
Uh,
so there's so much conflicting information that can happen out there too, and they don't really know. Sometimes as families sit down, I kind of start with, tell me what it is you know, because I don't ever want to come across as I'm being condescending to you. If you already know this information, there's no reason for me to cover it. Or I don't want to be talking at such a high level that you are so confused at what I'm saying, and I need to really simplify the information and be able to explain it in a more simplified manner. So I always start with the family member. More often, the common question I get asked as they get like what I get asked is, how long do you think they're going to be on this journey? At what point do you think they'll pass away? Like, how many years will I do? And there's around 400 types of dementia. So every dementia is a
ah,
little bit different. And what a lot of people believe is that dementia only happens to people as we age. And that's not true. The youngest person, in fact, of the 400 types of dementia, around 10 of those are pediatric. The youngest person worldwide to have ever been diagnosed with a form of dementia was 2 years old in Louisiana in March of 20.
ah.
And typically, those types of, there's actually around 700,000 individuals worldwide under the age of 18 with a form of dementia. And those types are usually genetic. If we looked at
Ah.
Alzheimer's, most people think that you don't get Alzheimer's until you get older. Several years ago, the Alzheimer's Association came out and they talked about early onset. That means you get the diagnosis when you're under the age of 60. The youngest person been diagnosed worldwide with a form of Alzheimer's was 19 years old in China. So I think the misnomer here is that people think that it only happens as you get older, and that's really not true. I wanna know, like, what type of dementia are we working with? Because how we guide and direct somebody with Alzheimer's is gonna be different than how I guide and direct somebody with maybe Lewy body or frontal temporal. And so, I always sit down first and just say, "Talk to me about what you do know. What questions or concerns or fears do you have? And then let's start finding out or delving in because while doctors used to try to say Alzheimer's or Lewy body or frontal temporal, what I see more often than not, probably in the last 10 years ish, is I'll see a diagnosis of dementia with or without unspecified behaviors, which doesn't tell the family a lot in which direction they need to start looking for answers.
So, when we start to realize cognitive decline, what can we do to help prevent or reverse the process? Is there an option that way?
Oh, absolutely. There is. The research now shows that we can identify changes in the brain up to 20 years prior to any kind of diagnosis. That's a lot of time for somebody to start implementing. I call it a lifestyle program, or I've referred to it as 7 stepping stones or 7 aspects. And it's not rocket science, but it has to be done consistently. So, one of the first things I tell people is that the brain has billions of neural pathways. Each of those pathways are coated with what's called myelin sheath. So it's a protective coating. For everybody, myelin starts breaking down in our late 30s and early 40s. And the thinner it is, or the more damaged it is, the slower the brain processes information or we recall memory. So when I'm speaking at a conference or I'm training, I'll usually kind of say, show of hands, how many people have opened the refrigerator and they weren't really sure if they were putting something in or taking something out. Right?
Yeah.
Or you walk into a room and you're like, well, what did I walk in here for?
Yes, yes.
So
I'm
that's
right there on that. I'm right there on that.
most people are, and we laugh about it. The problem becomes when we start actually seeing true cognitive decline in somebody, and they say, "Oh, I've just had a bad day," or "I didn't get a good night's sleep," or "It's just been so busy." Because this happens to us, we help excuse it away. We go, "Oh yeah, I know how it feels." Instead of looking at, are these really red flags and warning signs that I need to really start taking this more seriously? And there's this sort of juggling and balancing act. And talking to somebody about their cognitive skills can be a really super sensitive topic. And so I help guide and direct families in how to approach conversations or really what they should be observing and watching for as, is this really kind of myelin breaking down and it's something that we experience? Or is this truly something that should be concerning and you really need to step in and do something about it? So there are things too that, that I coach and guide families to look for. So to answer your other question, there are 7 components to protecting and maintaining cognitive health. The first one is nutrition. and knew the best, diet to be on for brain health is the keto diet.
Ah,
Yeah.
I do that.
Keto keto is super hard to stay on, so not everybody likes keto. It's
I
great for
Yep.
losing, but it's the best brain health diet to be on.
This is the second time I've been doing it. The first time I got sidetracked because I said my dad got ill and I was on the run so much that because normally I do all my meals, but
Yeah,
because I would spend almost 8 hours at a hospital and then toting my mother back and forth, I slid further away from it. Then I got, you know what I mean? Then I went into the grief. So, but now I'm doing it again because I realized that I felt the best during this time. So
yep,
if you're discouraged by what she's saying, I do a dirty keto. So I do vegetables. I just don't, I do vegetables, but I watch how many carbs. So if you guys are discouraged about this, there is a way to do it and you would enjoy it. Okay. Side
yeah.
note. Sorry.
No, no, no,
I
that's a great
interjected
side
in
note,
there.
because I think a lot of times the reason why people don't wanna do keto is because they heard it's so hard to stick to, and
Mm,
the dirty keto is a easier one to stick to, and you have a little bit more options, but it really
yes.
is the best diet for brain health. So, if somebody really doesn't want to do the keto way, the heart healthy diet, what we know, if it's good for the heart, it's good for the brain. So, the heart healthy diet is good. I really highly recommend the Mediterranean diet because it's easier than the keto, but it's rich in omega 3s. And that's one of the
Mm,
things that's really, really great for the brain. When people sit in front of me and they tell me they don't like salmon or they don't like tuna, then, can you take a supplement? You can. What I tell people is no one thing protects cognitive health. So when I look at things and I see, oh, play this game for 15 minutes a day and your memory will be better.
mhm,
Not
mm,
true.
yeah.
Um, buy this pillow and get a better night's sleep and your dementia symptoms will go away. Not true. And so you have to combine all 7 of these things. So if somebody is not going to eat salmon and they're not going to get their omega 3s that way, a supplement can do that. But know that a supplement is supplementing the 7 things. You're not going to take ginkgo biloba or lion's mane and all of a sudden everything, the brain fog will disappear. It's supplementing these 7 things you're already doing. If you're going to take a supplement, you can take fish oil, but MCT oil is actually the body absorbs it better and it's better for the brain.
I do that every day. In
Mm,
fact, it's in my she shed sink right now because I do it. Put it in my morning coffee,
yep.
and it keeps you at first, when you first do it, just so people understand this, when you first do it, your digestive system is gonna act a little bit crazy.
Yep.
You're going to
Yep.
be
That
in
is
the
true.
bathroom.
Yes,
Yeah,
that's true.
you will be in the bathroom. Do not overact. Do not do a whole bunch of it at first. You wanna
No.
slowly, do that because the more you do it in the very first, the more you're gonna find yourself in the bathroom, and you're gonna think you have diarrhea
Yep.
slowly,
Yep.
increments of it, and
Yep.
then your body adjusts, and then it's nothing. It's absolutely nothing after that.
Yeah.
At least
It's
it is
very
for me.
I use the oil. I don't use capsules, but I put
Me
it in.
too, me
Yeah,
too. I love the oil.
I love the oil. It doesn't I always tell people there's no taste. I can't taste it. There's
No,
no
I
taste
can't
to
either.
me. Where fish oil, if you burp, you're gonna get a fishy taste in your mouth, and some people don't like that.
Mm,
So I really encourage the MCT oil. And then the next step, the second one is hydration. And,
yes.
most people do not get enough water in their system. So I always say you need to be drinking at least 64 ounces of water a day. However, I do meet people on the opposite end who will come and I start talking and they're very proud and they go, "Oh, I drink a gallon of water a day." And I'm like, "Oh, you really shouldn't be." So if you took your weight and divided it in half, that's how many ounces you should max out at for water. So if you're 200 pounds, you should only be drinking 100 ounces in water. If you're 150 pounds, you should drink no more than about 75 ounces in water. Because when you drink too much water, it flushes your body of important vitamins, nutrients, and
Mm,
and
and
so
your electrolytes too, I would think.
and your electrolytes, exactly.
Yep.
So we start tweaking and adjusting those ounces. If like I worked with a gentleman who's 73 years old and played tennis 3 times a week. So I'm like, okay, well, immediately after tennis, you want to drink this water, but add electrolytes to it because you want to replace what you just perspired out.
Right.
If you're drinking caffeine, because I have people say, well, I drink coffee or tea. Does that count in my ounces? I'm like,
No.
it doesn't.
No.
And if it's caffeinated dehydrates your body. So if you're drinking 8 ounces of coffee, you probably should replace it with 8 ounces of water on top of what the recommendation is. So
Well,
hydration. Go ahead.
Let me ask you one quick question. When you talk about the hydration, because I do keto, I also have asthma now. Long
Mhm.
story on that, but that's another side story. But I do something, and I don't know if you have any familiarity with it's called keto electrolyte drops.
Yeah.
And oh, you've heard of it?
Yeah, I've heard of those. I There's a lot of companies out there now, because of the sports players, that they have
Yeah.
a powder that's electrolytes. They have drops that are like liquid drops that are electrolytes.
It's really helped me because I have the mucus more because of the asthma, and so I will do that in 1 tea glass before I drink my water and stuff,
Mhm.
and it has helped with that as well. So, a lot of times when they do keto, you find out that keeping yourself hydrated and keeping your electrolytes is a problem. Do you find that as an issue?
It can be, yeah. So you really do wanna watch that, and when I talk to people, when you're starting to get into all of that, working with a nutritionist, a diet a physician, a registered dietitian, they can look at your personal situation, like medications you might be on, all those things, and look at your personal situation, and then create a plan that works best for you as an individual.
Okay, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to
No,
interrupt that. Just
no,
quick
you're
question.
fine.
Go
No,
ahead.
great. The next step, the third step in all of this is sleep, and it's not the quantity of sleep that one gets, it is the quality of sleep that one gets. So, for some people, I so what I tell people is when you go into a deep sleep, your what they call the glymphatic system, basically I call it, your fluid in your body. It actually you put your brain through what we call a car wash. Okay, if you can imagine your dirty car going through the car wash, what does it look like on the other end, or what should it look like on the other end? And really what this glymphatic system does is it flushes the toxic waste from the brain. And when that doesn't happen, then buildup starts to happen on the brain. And then what happens is you can't remember things. Your thinking will slow down. Your brain literally shuts off in the afternoon, or you feel brain fog or brain fatigue. And so individuals who tell me, "Oh, I can function on 4 or 5 hours of sleep." I'm like, "No, you really can't. That's not helping you." And the reason why doctors tell us get 8 hours, an average of 8 hours of sleep is because typically two-thirds of that is quality sleep, and then a third of the quality sleep is deep sleep. And so you really need about 6 hours of quality sleep and 2.5 to 3 hours of deep sleep for your brain to go through the necessary process to flush it so that it's ready for the next day. People who I think people who work overnight shifts are at risk for not getting the right amount of sleep. People with PTSD don't get the right amount of sleep. Their sleep gets disrupted. And what studies show us is that sleep deprivation actually causes the brain to shrink. And when the brain starts shrinking, it creates bigger cavities in there. So the brain can't send messages from point A to point B as efficiently. It's not going to process information as quickly or as efficiently. It's not going to retain it. You're not going to be able to recall it. All of a sudden, you get into lots of challenges and issues. So, I have an Apple Watch. I have an app called Auto Sleep, and it actually tracks my sleep every single night so that I can see where I'm landing if I need to make
Uh-huh.
tweaks or adjustments.
No, I use the Fitbit, but I get what you're saying on that.
Yeah, yeah. So there are, I mean, there's a lot of different apps out there now. There's a lot of different things. People who, one of my a doctor told me one time, because we have residents who would be on melatonin or who would be on like a Tylenol or an Advil PM, and those are okay periodically, but to have constant chronic use of those things actually starts blocking our memory receptors, and it's going to cause more damage with our memory. So trying to find a better way to get a better night's sleep. That might be no TV in your room. That may be turning off iPhones, iPads, tablets about an hour to 2 hours before you're going to go to sleep, because the lights that come out of that actually affect the melatonin and our circadian rhythm in our body.
Mhm.
Having your house at a cooler temperature, putting it down to about 65 or 68 degrees. So when it's cooler, you actually fall into a deeper sleep. I was once told that the body replaces calcium overnight. So if you're going to take a calcium supplement, take it in the evening. And, our grandmothers growing up would say, if you have trouble sleeping, just get a glass of warm milk. Well, it's the calcium in the milk that really is what helps us go into a deeper sleep. And that's a much more natural way of doing that. So let me make something really clear. I'm not saying have a bowl of ice cream with calcium in it. That's not what I'm saying. Because I've had people go, "Oh, I can have some vanilla ice cream." I'm like, "No, no, 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 you can't." Because the processed sugar is not good for our brains. But sleep is really important. It's also one of the hardest things to fix when someone's not getting a good night's sleep. I really recommend people go to a sleep specialist to help get some really good guidance if they're truly having difficulty getting a good night's sleep.
I get you.
Yeah. The fourth step in it is getting oxygenated blood to the brain. And so anything you do that's cardio, walking, swimming, water aerobics, bicycling, Pilates, yoga, those kind of things, resistant training, all help get oxygen to the brain. I coach people on even doing deep breathing exercises in the morning as before they get out of bed and in the evening before they go to sleep when they're laying down and the lungs are stretched out. As humans, we typically only use the top third of our lungs. And so when we start implementing deep breathing exercises, it can feel uncomfortable or even painful because we're now starting to push air into an area of our lung that we're just not used to doing. I say start off with 1 to 2 minutes in the morning and in the evening and try to work up to 15 minutes, and you'd be amazed at how you feel. And so the research even shows that these short bursts of oxygenated blood to the brain are even more beneficial than going on a long walk for 60 minutes. So I try to coach people, if you just set your clock 5 minutes and walk in place as fast as you can, my resting heart rate is about 60 to 65, and I can get my heart rate up to about 120 to 130 beats a minute in 5 minutes, just walking in place very quickly. So you do that,
Nice.
4 or 5 times through the day. Set a timer. So I get up. My watch will tell me to get up and walk around. I've been sitting too long, and I always tell people when people say, "I'm too busy, I can't go on a 30-minute walk. I'm too busy, I can't go on this." And I'm like, "I'll bet you I can find 4 or 5 times in your day where you have 5 minutes to walk in place. Just 5 minutes to
Yeah.
walk in place throughout the day." And that is pushing, oxygenated blood to the brain. And it's oxygenated blood to the brain is like oil for a car. And so you really have to have it. When people start going into panic mode, it's usually, or, they hyperventilate, it's usually they're not getting oxygen to the brain. And so a lot of times my teenagers used to get so mad at me when they come in and they're frustrated. I'm like, "Okay, how about we do some deep breathing, get some oxygen to the brain, and then we can have a conversation." And my daughter one time said, "Mom, I've already done the deep breathing. I just need to talk to you." I'm like, "Okay." Alrighty. So oxygen to the brain is super important. Socialization is the next step in this process. And what I find as we get older, if we start having hearing challenges, and when we're looking at cognitive assessments, if the auditory processing, auditory memory, and visual or short term memory or working memory are all low, it puts you at higher risk for dementia diagnosis. If logic and reasoning, processing speed, and attention are also low, you've compounded your risk of getting a dementia diagnosis. So it is important to get your hearing checked. And there's a difference between the hearing mechanism and cognitive skills. So I always tell people that they really should find a company who can actually assess cognitive skills as well as going to an audiologist who can assess the hearing because they're two completely different things. I've known many people who will have the best hearing aid out there, the best hearing aid money can buy, and they still end up with dementia and the families don't understand why. And I'm like, because what the hearing aid's doing is amplifying the hearing mechanism, but it's not doing anything to strengthen the auditory processing or auditory memory. So one of the number one-on-one brain training company out there in the world is Learning RX. It is in 45 countries. If you do not have a Learning RX near you, they can find one that's close, but they can do cognitive assessments virtually and they can train virtually as well. And so, but one of the things I see is people's hearing starts to decline, whether it's due to the hearing mechanism or auditory processing. They just start to isolate themselves. They start to, withdraw. And that is the opposite thing that they should do. But nobody, I don't care what age you are, nobody wants to made to feel like an idiot. And so if I can't keep up with the conversation, if I can't
Mhm.
hear what someone's saying to me, if I can't respond appropriately or think of an answer, why would I want to put myself in that position? It's easier for me just to stay in my home where I feel safe and I feel comfortable. And so, unfortunately, we do the opposite of what we should be doing. We really should be doing more socializing. So, when I work with individuals, it's one of the last things I try to help them do because it would be like me throwing somebody in the deep end of the pool and saying swim. I mean, I'm putting them in the most uncomfortable position that I could. So I work on everything else first. And then we start saying, is it possible to join a Bible study through your church? Is it possible to take a class at the senior center? And let's start dipping our toes into more social events. And I start developing a plan for them so that we start adding socialization back into their world while they're working on everything else. Managing stress is the sixth one. When our body, everybody reacts to stress differently. Some people get aches and pains in their muscles. Some people carry it in their shoulders or their neck or their backs. Some people have digestive issues, sleep issues, you name it. But managing stress actually raises cortisol in our bodies.
Mm, yeah.
Cortisol is really bad for the brain. And so finding ways to manage your stress, and again, that's different for everybody. For some people, taking a nap manages their stress. For some other people, being able to go for a walk and listen to music. Some people, it's a bubble bath or a hot shower or a pedicure or a massage or go see a Reiki master. My goodness, they are great for somebody to reduce stress.
I
So,
I I have found, sorry to interject, but I found it's not just an activity for me. I do over 20,000 steps a day, but for me, and I'm also a fidgeter. I'm always moving my legs, so that might have something to do with it. And I wear my Fitbit on my ankle, but that's that's another side step there. But I'm just trying to, make sure people understand where my 20,000 steps are coming from. But I have found that I set boundaries. When I realize that something is causing me stress, I had a lot of different changes in my life really quick after my dad and then my mom and everything like that. I found boundaries and it might upset those around you, but and I don't mean it in like an aggressive kind of way. I mean like, no, I'm sorry, I can't do that. Got this, and this. Once you stop trying to do a million things at once, at least in my case, my stress lessened. Does that make any sense?
yeah, it does, because for all of us, we have to first identify what's going to feed our soul. And for some
Mhm.
people, that is setting boundaries. For other people, it's actually feeling needed or feeling like I've helped this person and I've added value here. And those are two completely different personalities. For some people, it's cooking. Not me. My sister, my younger sister's, she ranks right up there next to Betty Crocker. She can cook anything. I jokingly say my four food groups are fast, frozen, takeout, delivery. How her and I came from the same set of parents, who knows? But for some people, it's crocheting. For some people, it's reading. For some people, everybody knows what feeds their soul. And when you know what feeds your soul, it's what's also going to help you reduce the stress and manage it better as well.
Yeah. I think for mine is, like I said, setting the boundaries, but I think my mother is probably on the other side that she probably feels that I'm putting boundaries that she doesn't get to do more for me. And that might stress her out more because I'm like, no, I don't need that. Please. You know what I mean?
Ooh.
Um, but it's kind of hard when you get into those dynamics because you're an adult child. I'm in my 50s. So it's very hard to have someone come in and try to do my stuff for me, you know?
Right. And I'm in my 50s as well.
Yeah.
And when I find those individuals, like for you, as a daughter,
Uh-huh.
and you were saying this is your mom who does this for you. And so
Uh-huh.
maybe it's her need, what feeds her soul is knowing that she's helped somebody. Well, I would say, can we find volunteer opportunities for her? I already know when I retire, my volunteers, I am going to go volunteer at the hospital in the NICO unit for babies who just need to be held because mom and dad are at work. I'm just going to go and volunteer a couple of days a week, and I get to hold newborn babies because they need to have that flesh to flesh or human contact. And when mom and dad have to be at work and they're in the NICO for so many weeks, right? Or there's, how many humane society, if you love animals and being around pets, but you don't want one of your own, or you're older and you're worried about what will happen to that pet as you age, go
Uh-huh.
volunteer. I mean, there are dog sitting company, dog grooming. I had a late when we used to take our dogs to get groomed. There was an older lady who just checked dogs in, play with them until it was ready, and she would check dogs out. I'm like, what a great job. Awesome. How awesome is that? So, I mean, there's ways to fill that need without it maybe being a traditional way of doing it. And so when we start broadening the thought process there and say, well, have you thought of this or have you thought of that? All of a sudden, we can find a way to fill that need for your mom without it continuing to stress you out too, right?
Right. Right.
So the last one in the 7 steps is cognitive exercising or brain training. I did mention Learning RX is the number one brain training company around the world. Lumosity is the number one brain training app. And then Brain HQ. I also like Brain HQ. Brain HQ and Learning RX are both scientifically backed. Everything they do has a science component behind it. There's a lot of research that goes behind exercises and why they do what they do. A lot of times I get people who will say, "Well, Kathy, I play Sudoku. Am I exercising my brain? Or can you please tell me the brain app I should be doing or the cognitive game I should be doing?" So my answer, or I've also had people say, "Well, my dad played crossword puzzles his whole life, still got dementia, so those don't work." And I'm like, okay,
Mhm.
so let's take a step back. First and foremost, I can't recommend what cognitive app game you should be playing unless I know the strengths and weaknesses of your brain. Most times when people start playing Sudoku or Word Find or crossword or whatever that is, what they're doing is they're gravitating to what they enjoy, what's fun, what they like, and what they're good at, which means they're strengthening the strongest part of their brain. That's what they're doing. They're not really strengthening the weaker part of their brain. So, why you still get dementia is because you never focused on the weaker skills. All you did was focus on the stronger skills. That's all you did. And
Right.
so, I also say when people go, "Well, am I exercising my brain?" And I said, "Well, yes and no. If you have a gym membership and you walk into a gym, and let's just say you go 5 days a week, and kudos to you, but you walk in, you do bicep curls, and you walk out, are you exercising your body?" Well, yes and no. You're exercising your biceps, but you're not doing for anything else on your body. So that's really what happens when we start playing like crossword puzzles. We're exercising one part of the brain. When we play Sudoku, we're exercising one part of the brain. When you work with companies who actually know what they're doing, like Learning RX or Lumosity or Brain HQ, they're focused on making sure they're working the harder, the weaker part of the brains and targeting those weaker skills to strengthen them so that learning is easier, thinking is faster, and memory is better.
Right.
So those
Okay.
are the 7 components that help protect and maintain cognitive health. And when you combine those, I've had a handful of clients where we've reversed their cognitive decline. I've had people come in to avoid a dementia diagnosis. And so if I can I delay it? It depends on where someone is at in that dementia journey as to whether implementing this is effective or not. But the nice thing that I love in the clients I work with, it's usually their doctor or their neurologist who is telling them your cognitive decline is reversing. What are you doing? Because you're getting better on their cognitive assessments. And then they tell them, I'm working with Kathy with Silver Tsunami. So I have some doctors who will recommend me to clients who are newly diagnosed or who want to protect and maintain cognitive health because we know it works.
Nice. So, can you explain terms, what people should understand about I know you said there's 400, so I might be asking a lot of you. Different types of dementia.
So really what we start seeing is the Alzheimer's Association actually has a presentation called the 10 warning signs. So I would encourage someone to go to alz.org and look at those. It's things like when I tell people, like I jokingly will say who opened the refrigerator because that happens to all of us. But if somebody, misplaces something and they can't retrace their steps to go, okay, what was I doing? And that sometimes takes a little bit. My husband is great at putting his car keys in the same place every time we get home. I am not. They get thrown in my bag, they get thrown in my coat, they get thrown on the counter. And so I'll sit there and go, "Okay, when I walked in last night, this is what who I was talking to, or was I not on the phone and this is what I did. Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. I remember placing them on the counter next to my phone and so they must still be there." So I can at least retrace my steps, but at some point that doesn't happen and they can't retrace their steps. That is a warning sign. When bills start getting unpaid, when the person who kept a well kept home, all of a sudden you go over there and it's dusty or it's starting to get cluttered. That is not their personality. Their personalities start changing. I often I remember a son one time when he was admitting his dad to memory care, and he's like, "I'm so baffled. I talk to my dad every Sunday night. I don't get it." And I go, "Oh, well, let me tell you how that conversation went." You would call and he would say, "How are you doing?" And you would tell him. And then he would say, "How's your wife?" And you would tell him. And "How are the kids?" And you would tell him. "How's work?" You would tell him. And he'd say, "I know you're busy. Now 30, 40 minutes going by. I know you're busy. And let me go. I'll talk to you next week." And the son's mouth just dropped. He's like, "How did you know?" And he said, "Kathy,
Mm.
next to his recliner, he had this cool list of questions that you could see check marks." And I go, "Yeah." So when families visit, if like let's say you're visiting at the holidays and mom's stuffing doesn't taste the way it always did. It's too
Mhm.
salty or it's not as moist, she'll make excuses like, "Oh, I must have been in a hurry or I must have mismeasured." But that's starting to be this warning sign of, well, wait a minute, if mom always knew how to make this, or she seems a little disheveled, or she repeats a question, does that mean she's getting dementia? Yes or no? Maybe, maybe not. It could be she's dehydrated. It could be that she's tired and hasn't gotten a good night's sleep. It could be that she's on a new medication that's causing problems. I tell people go see your physician, rule out everything else first, because there's a lot of things that can mimic dementia symptoms. And I don't ever want someone to receive a diagnosis when really it's, oh, you're dehydrated. Let's get that fixed. Oh, this medication is not mixing with your other medications and we need to have a different format here. And so there's a lot of things that can be done to reverse the confusion or the brain fogginess or the cognitive decline that's happened. It doesn't mean somebody has dementia, but there are clear warning signs that we should be noticing and we just should be observing and watching, because the sooner you can catch it, the better. The better your chances are of reversing cognitive decline, the better your chances are of getting on a medication that can plateau or delay the progression of it. When you wait too long, there's a lot of things that can't happen. One of the most critical, important things is legal paperwork. At some point, you should be doing legal paperwork. So people go, well, when should I have a trust, or when should I have a will, or when should I have some of those documents? I'm like, when you turn 18, that's when. Because if you're, as a college kid, if you're in a car accident and now you're in the hospital and you're non-communicative, who's going to make those decisions for you? So people only think that you should start estate planning when you turn 60. And I'm like, you should start having some of those legal documents in place, and who will make decisions for you when you become an adult at 18. And there are great estate planning attorneys out there who can help and guide and direct. Now, does an 18 or a 20 or 25-year-old need an expansive estate plan? Of course they don't. But they need some legal documents in place for someone to make a decision in case something happens. And then, especially as we start aging, it's super important to have legal documents in order, because if you get to the point where you can't make a decision, now it's going to be the courts. You have to go pursue guardianship or conservatorship, and those are costly and they are lengthy, and it is time consuming.
Right. So, what about this came to me when you were talking about signs. What about repeating the stories?
Yes,
Because
repeating stories, repeating questions, repeating the same question. There's so many the great movies that have been out there, like, Still Alice is a great movie. And there's a scene in this movie where the actress comes in and she asks her daughter's boyfriend a question in the kitchen, and then they move out the food is out on the dining room table, and she sits down and she looks at him and asks him the same exact question. And so when you see those things, it's like, wait a minute, what? What just happened? The person who is experiencing it already can identify that changes have been happening long before it's ever diagnosed and long before anyone else ever notices. And they start putting systems in place to compensate and to accommodate for it, to band-aid this together for as long as they can. Because I think most people hear the word dementia and they catapult themselves to the end of the disease, where their keys to the car are taken away from them, their total care. People say, well, I'm just laying in bed in diapers. And there's so much living and things that can be done in between those 2 points. And people don't want their independence taken away from them. They think if I start telling my family I'm having memory issues, they're going to take my car keys away from me, or they're going to put me in senior living. So especially when we haven't had those discussions as a family, or if family dynamics are stressed or challenged, those are really things that people become very fearful of.
right. When my mother first moved here, I know we're way over our time, 20 minutes, but that's fine. You're such a vast bit of a knowledge. I'd hate to let you go.
Oh, thank you.
Um, you really are, because I love getting people to actually openly talk about this in the fields that you are very hard to find at times. Trust me, I have tried multiple times. I passed my business card out lots of times when my dad was going through his difficulties,
Hmm.
just so I could have people talk about these areas. One of the things that I pushed my mother to do when she first moved in, she's in her 70s, and she was walking with a cane when she first lived here. And I got her on weight training, just mild ankle weights and some small dumbbells and
Hmm.
some band work. And now she doesn't need the cane. So physically, you know what I mean? I know that that's one of the standing things in. And as a caregiver, I mean, there's always more things I'm sure I'm lacking. So when you have families, what is the most commonly misunderstand aspect for them as far as the caregiving role?
I I think that as children, it's really difficult to watch our parents get older. And I do think where the physical component is very important. The keeping strong so you can transfer core, keeping your core strong because the core helps us get up and down. It helps us transfer. It helps us roll over in bed. There's a lot of things to the core. So when you're doing strengthening exercises, it's not just about the legs and the arms. It's also keeping that core very, very strong. But what I see is more people will find resources to help somebody physically. If somebody is starting to cognitive decline, I see families make more excuses for them because it's scary for them. They they don't have really good resources to tell me how am I supposed to navigate this journey. I don't want to walk into a room and my mom doesn't know who I am. Or my dad thinks that I'm my sister or that I'm my mom and I'm really his daughter. I mean, the families who sit in front of me, and that's why I sit there and go through like, let's talk about your questions because people try to approach this journey so logically. And this is the emotional. This is an emotional journey. And I have never once seen it being easy for anybody. They get hit with unprepared conversations. I have a really, really dear friend who there are three presentations that I do and I give and trainings that I do that I don't know anywhere else that gives them. But, and he's the one who really prompted me. But his dad was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, I want to say in 2012. And a year or two into it, as his dad was still pretty independent, knew what he was saying. He wasn't really cognitive decline. They were sitting having a conversation, and his father said to him, I'm going to take my life. I don't want to go through
Ah,
this journey. And he said, Kathy, nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared me for that conversation. He looked and looked and looked all over the internet at that time. And he said, you can find statistics about suicide and dementia, but there is no, this is how you have this conversation. And so I think that what happens as a caregiver is one, you get catapulted into that role, whether you wanted it or not, whether you volunteered for it or not, and you don't get a training manual or anything to say, oh, here, this happened. We'll do these steps one, two, and three. And this is how you have that conversation. And and so for a caregiver, every day they're living day to day, hour to hour, or minute to minute, doing the very best they can. And at the end of the day, they still don't think it's enough. They still don't
yeah.
ever enough, and they beat themselves up so much. So, there's not great information around domestic violence and dementia. There's not great information around suicide and dementia, and there's not great information around sexual behaviors in dementia. And so those are the three things that that I do train on, that I do educate on because that information is incredibly hard to find. And those are real scenarios that can and do happen in caregivers' face. So I feel for caregivers who do this. I've seen them from all walks of life. I'm seeing them from rural communities to metro communities, and it's just not easy. So really, Silver Tsunami was launched because of all my years of experience. And not that I've seen it all, but I have seen a lot in my career. And it's really helping families have better tips. And that's what the book is being launched this spring. You can go on my website and buy it at a discounted rate now. The book is called Navigating the Dementia Experience or Navigating Your Ticket to Compassion, Navigating the Dementia Experience. And it has 18 chapters. It's themed around an amusement park. And it's 18 chapters of really solid advice. Is it going to help everybody? No. Is it going to have every tip in there that somebody needs? No, it's not. But that's also why we're slowly developing our Silver Tsunami community, and people can send in emails and people can talk. And I do a 1 hour, no obligation, no cost consultation so that I can hear the questions and say, okay, have you tried this? Or let's talk about this. So caregivers get hit from all sides, and it's so different for a child who's an only child to children. There's 10 children and nobody gets along. Family dynamics play a role. So when I say when you've met one dementia person, you've met one dementia person. And so I customize everything I do to the person who's sitting in front of me. I listen, I take notes, and then we go through and start customizing the plan for them because a blanket approach does not work when you're caring for somebody with dementia.
I need to thank you so much, Kathy, for being with us.
Thank you
Also,
for
I wanna
having me.
well, I love having I like I said, we've already went 51 minutes, so But that's fine because you are a wealth of knowledge, and I think a lot more people need a lot of these details put out there. And I welcome you if you ever want to do segments, if you ever want to break things down, have an open platform here. I'll even rearrange schedules if need be because
Well, thank
I really would. Because usually I only do lives on Thursdays with guests. I do a lot of political commentary, but if you wanted to open yourself up, no pressure. This is if it just meets your schedule or if it's
you.
something that you want to do and you'd be more than happy to use the audio or criteria. I'll make it available to you if that's what you wanted. But anytime you want to come in for segments or things that you want to bring a spotlight to, my platform is yours because I
Well,
really go
I'm
ahead.
very honored. I'm very honored. Thank you so much for the offer. I would love to be continued guest on your show. And maybe next time, instead of doing a general thing, we can just pick a topic that
Yes,
I
that'd be
know,
great.
and we'll just talk about that one topic for that show. But I'd love to be a recurring guest on your show. Thank you so
That
much.
well, that'd be fantastic. I will leave our message up through Podmatch while we got. You can if figure out what works for you and I will make it happen. It doesn't have to be on Thursdays. We can make a special day for it if that's what you
Okay.
want to do. And we can even plan the calendar now for the year. We'll get on it. It's
We'll
just
get on it.
yeah, we will get on it. I just find this a wealth of information and it's also if we stick to one topic, I can bring a lot more informational notes to bring questions maybe to ask that would relate to more what we're speaking at that moment. But I want to thank you so much for giving us your time. Valuable information. So thank you
Thank
so
you.
very much.
Thank you very much. I hope you have a wonderful evening.
You too. Again, to our listeners, thank you guys very much for partaking. Until next time, bye bye for now.